As anyone who's talked to me for any length of time would know, I am super normal about all of my interests. I definitely would not spend too much time thinking about them, or talking about them, or making entire YouTube channels dedicated to them. With that being said, here's a video about how I think people should make a movie based off of a song I like, and how I think that should look. Hi fellas, my name is Teddy Clyde, and I have too many opinions on things that do not matter. As you probably figured, I was being very sarcastic in that opening. And with all of that, I really like music. Like, bring out my phone to pull up a Spotify song in the middle of a conversation type of really like music, which is definitely not annoying to people. You know, I definitely don't feel like Ken in the Barbie movie. With that, I really like the lyrics of songs especially, and even more so when those lyrics have like a cohesive, thorough story presented to us. So the idea of taking one of these songs with a story plot line through it and turning it into a book or movie has been kind of just rattling around in my brain for years, and it all started with the song Copacabana by Barry Manilow. In all honesty, this video was going to be about a bunch of different songs with plot lines and how they should be movies, but this one in particular just like stuck in my brain, and I had such specific visions for what this should look like, so now it is dedicated to just this song. Back to Copacabana though, I've been hearing the song functionally as long as I've been alive, but a lot of people my age have been only hearing it more recently in the past like 2 or 3 years, as a section of it became a popular TikTok audio. Specifically the section that goes, her name was Lola, she was a showgirl, but that was 30 years ago when she used to have a show. Blah, 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 blah. It just kind of keeps going from there. But this part of the song specifically comes from the end of the song and the end of the story. If you listen to the actual story being told beyond that 20-second clip, it follows a young dancer named Lola and her romance with a guy named Tony, who is a bartender. They both work at the Copacabana, which is the hot spot to go in their area. What area that actually is, though, is kind of up for debate, as there is both a real nightclub called Copacabana in New York, and there is a Copacabana beach in Rio. The song does say that the club is north of Havana, which only applies to the New York option, which would make that probably the more accurate of the two locations, but it does make the whole thing very confusing. On top of that, everyone I talked to who has heard the song assumed that it was either happening in Cuba or at the very least somewhere tropical, which, you know, does not help. But seeing as there is the actual nightclub in New York, and it has been kind of said to be the reference point for the song, that is the location I'm sticking with for my pitch for this movie. But I'm willing to hear out other versions if people would prefer that, but we're just sticking with the New York club as a location basis point for the video. Whatever the location is, this club is very tropically themed, with clear influences from Latin America, especially noted in the dances that Lola is doing at the club, such as the cha-cha and the merengue. On top of all of it, this club is the hip happening place to be at this time. Lola and Tony work together every night from 8 till 4 and are very much in love. Unfortunately, one night, a rich guy named Rico attends, and he is immediately very, very taken with Lola. After her set, he calls her over and, quote, goes a bit too far. And meanwhile, of course, Tony is the bartender and is watching this all happen, and so he jumps over the bar to stop Rico. Fight ensues, it's a whole big thing, chairs are broken, yada yada, and then there's a single gunshot. Then, of course, the song makes you wait a whole entire chorus section to find out who actually just got shot, but of course it ends up being Tony, and he dies. Then we have a time jump where we catch up with the TikTok audio portion of the song. It is 30 years in the future, and Lola is a has-been showgirl. The club is now a disco, which implies that this is happening in the 1970s, and one could definitely argue probably 1978, as that is the year the song came out. This then puts the rest of the song where, like, Lola and Tony were working in this club in the 1940s, probably post-war, if we're going to say it's in the 1978 era. Lola has lost everything at this point and is spending her time pretending everything is as it was. She sits in her old dress, she has her faded feathers in her hair, and she is drinking her life away. To quote the song, she lost her youth and she lost her Tony, now she's lost her mind. And that is where we just leave her and where her story ends. We're given the starting plot, the main action, and the resolution of the story, so all someone would really need to do is just fill in all of the in-between, and then you got a full, story and you got a full movie. In my heart of hearts, this movie opens with a 1970s era Lola just wasting away her life at this bar. And she'll be saying things like, "Oh, I'm such a star, and I wonder when Tony's coming back and where he's at right now." Just kind of implying she either has dementia or she's in general denial about all of the things that have happened in her past that you as an audience member either fully don't know is going to be happening, or you definitely know because you've heard the song and that's why you're watching this movie. The bartender at this disco would be handing Lola a glass, and as the camera follows the glass as it's being handed over, instead of old Lola grabbing it, a young hand does, and it is young Lola in the past. And now we are transported not from the current day disco or current day 70s disco, we are transported into the 1940s where Lola is grabbing a glass from the bartender, Tony. The dress that old Lola is wearing in that present day 70s is the dress that young Lola is wearing, but the one on old Lola is disheveled and the color has since faded out and it just looks a mess. But when it goes to young Lola, she is beautiful and it is in pristine condition. From there, we will just follow Lola and Tony's love story. I think starting at a place where Tony is the new flirty bartender and Lola is just trying to focus on her career would make a lot of sense. The only thing we really have to base this off of is that the song says that she's trying to be a star, but elsewise I'm just kind of making things up at this point, which you better get used to because the song really does not give us that much to work off of, and so the rest of this is me just making stuff up. You can get a whole lot of movie out of just a love story and then all of the performing aspects of the Copacabana, but if we're sticking with the New York setting, there are historical ties to the actual nightclub with the mob, which I think would be kind of fun if we peppered into our story. I think this could be done in a few ways, but I'm personally leaning towards a situation in which maybe a low-level guy in the mob ends up harassing Lola, and this would be out of the way and out of the view of most people around, but Tony happens to be walking by, and he decides to step in, either threaten the guy or beat him up or kind of just whatever. Whatever the actual specifics of the scene are, whatever happens, it does need to turn out well for Tony so that when he essentially does the exact same thing at the end of the story, he feels he could win, and it feels like something that his character would for sure do. Lola should definitely be very grateful for the fact that he stood up for her, but also I think definitely worried about his safety, kind of foreshadowing that hey, they worked out for you this time, but it's not going to work out for you indefinitely. I personally don't care that much on how these two get together, as I love a good slow burn, but the song does kind of imply that it needs to be a more serious relationship by the time Tony gets shot, so it does kind of need to happen a little bit earlier in the movie than I personally would prefer. So really what happens could just be whatever, so it could either be hey, Tony defended her against this mob guy, and she's just so great, and then that really spurs them to get together, or he could just ask her out. It could be kind of whatever. This is a very loose plot point that just needs to happen at some point into the film. They need to be together for a decent chunk, but of course, a good portion of this movie should be dedicated to Lola as the main character. This can be done by having her fight with some of the other dancers, or have issues with her appearance, or, any of the other stereotypical ideas that a writer will give a female character because they can't write anything else that's more interesting for them. It's fine. But since I am personally better than all of those writers, I think a much more interesting storyline would have Lola be a person of color who is white passing, as that would be very interesting given the setting of the Copacabana in the 1940s. The actual bar that we're basing this after at the time had policies against people of color coming in, so she having to watch people that she has this connection with get discriminated against and having nothing she can do about it, I think would be very interesting if it is explored in a nuanced, correct way, and it would be easy to fuck up. But again, this is my dream movie, so we're doing it great. In the real bar, there were performers allowed that were performers of color, but they were very obviously not treated as well, and they were typically the big name stars such as like Nat King Cole or Sammy Davis Jr. So her hiding the fact that she isn't white, I think, would make sense in this time frame. Moving on, the end of the movie would follow pretty much exactly as the song states. You know, there's going to be the big fight, Tony's going to die, and then we're back with older Lola. I think she would down the drink that she'd been handed at the beginning of the movie, and as she's kind of sitting there, the bar disco around her starts to morph into the 1940s Copacabana that she had, like, been a youth in, and kind of were, like, jumping into her hallucinations that she's having. And then the door would open, and in walks a guy who looks exactly like Tony, and then I think we have the credits roll. That's all I really have on specific plot beats. Though, related, it is worth mentioning, while I was looking up stuff for this video, I ended up finding out that there is a stage play and stage-like musical version of this story. And when I found that out, I was a little worried that I just basically rewrote the entire plot of a pre-existing stage musical. And then I looked at the plot and it's completely different, so we're in the clear. It's weird what changes were made. Like, Lola gets kidnapped by Rico and he takes her to Cuba, and then I think Tony gets shot in Cuba, not at the bar, and there's not the whole big fight, and it's also like a guy writing a song, and so he embeds himself into the story of the Copacabana, and it's like a story within a story, kind of it was all of a dream sort of situation, which feels like a cop-out. The whole thing's really weird, but at least I didn't pitch the exact same thing, and I like mine better, so yay! Now, I have some miscellaneous things that I think should be included into this movie, and I'm going to start out with talking about the actors. Now, I don't have really specific visions for who I want to play Lola and Tony, because I honestly believe that they should be played by some no-name actors. Hollywood using the same, 10 people in every role makes it really hard to get invested in those characters and truly see those people as the characters they're playing. And I think I'm already fighting an uphill battle on that end, because everyone's already going to know the plot of the story, so I want them to get as immersed as possible. And, don't get me wrong, I love a Tom Cruise movie as much as the next guy, but every time I watch one of those movies, I'm seeing Tom Cruise on my screen, not whatever character he is supposed to be playing, you know? So, trying to avoid that as much as I can. General visions, though, Lola's actor needs to be able to sing and dance pretty well. Again, I don't have any, proper visions of who I want, but I do think taking someone off of Broadway and putting them in this role, kind of like what they did with Anita in the newer West Side Story movie, would work really well. That's not to say that, all Broadway stars are, no-named actors, but they're certainly not, the same household names that a lot of Hollywood people are. If you put a gun to my head and force me to give you a name for just any actress that really kind of embodies what I'm looking for, I would say Vanessa Hudgens. She can both sing and dance and is also, white passing, but not white. And so that kind of fulfills those aspects of the character, but she's both too famous for this role and just older than what Lola would realistically be. But just kind of, think slightly older than High School Musical era Vanessa Hudgens, I think could work. Tony should just be a guy. You know, a pretty guy, but he should just be a guy. To be slightly more specific, this guy needs to look like he could and would be in a fight, but also like he fits well within the 1940s. A good example of what not to do is the Ansel Elgort as Tony in the West Side Story remake that came out a few years ago. As he looks like he definitely knows what a cell phone is, but also fully does not know what a gang is, let alone would be like a major part of one. So we are trying to avoid doing that with the casting. My gun to my head, a casting choice for this role would be a young Ryan Guzman, who is best known for his role as Eddie Diaz in 911, but like, truly a lot of guys could do it, so, But again, I still want that, like, no-name actor to play him. On the other hand, though, Rico should absolutely be played by a big name star, as the other two main characters of this movie will not have the, like, audience drawing in power as a big name would. So, my first thought was, oh, let's get Barry Manilow to do it, but he is currently 82 years old, and I just cannot imagine an 82-year-old beating a 20-something Tony in a fight, so that doesn't really work super well. I do think Barry Manilow absolutely should be in the movie in some regard, so having him either be like the bar owner in the past, or maybe even an older Rico if we want to include him in the future scenes, because that could be kind of cool and interesting. But just, he should definitely be in this movie as it is his song, but it does not make sense for him to be a Rico. It just does not work. I was then thinking Pedro Pascal would be a great answer because he definitely could pull that character off very well and has that star power behind him right now. But as we've already established, people of color are not allowed in, so he's a wash as well. So, current vibe is something of like a Colin Farrell type, maybe. But if you want to hear my truly wild card answer, I think Chris Evans could do it. I think if he pulls in that like charismatic but sleazy persona, kind of similar to what he did in Knives Out, I think it could really work, and it would definitely be not what people are expecting from this movie. So I think it'd be kind of fun, but I was really just kind of grasping at straws for who could play him. It also just depends on like who is the correct age when this movie comes out and has that star power at that time. Next up, I want to talk about costuming. Obviously, Lola gets a short dress and feathers in her hair, as that is what is directly said in the song, but she is going to realistically need more than that one costume as a performer, so I think taking pictures directly from the 1940s Copacabana would be a really good starting place for designing the costuming for this movie. As you can see with some of the pictures I've thrown up on the screen right now, some of the costumes tie in directly with whatever act that they are performing on and have that kind of like theming around them, but at a base level there are a handful of things in common. Typically the top of the outfit is a bikini piece that is very tight fitting, but the skirts are a lot looser and flowier, and there might be hair pieces that tie in with the whole cohesive outfit, but the hair is not typically loose and down, but it is tied up. So they have a very uniform look while also being very distinct outfits. So we can kind of just steal aspects from any of these and make it work. As all of the pictures from back then are in black and white, we're not seeing all of the color that was definitely in those costumes, so we kind of have to guess a little bit on that end, but there's definitely color. I always personally imagine Lola's like main dress being yellow, as it would match the yellow feathers that are mentioned to be in her hair, but technically I guess her dress could be a different color, but it definitely should be yellow. Whatever it ends up actually looking like, the dresses in this movie should be very bright and vibrant and have a lot of motion in them to really capture the feeling of this nightclub, and I do think we should strive for them to be as historically accurate as possible. I think I'm looking for the same thing in the costuming as I'm also looking for in the general vibe and visuals of this movie, being very bright, very moving, and very flashy. So I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from the newer Elvis movie that came out with Austin Butler in it, that had been directed by Baz Luhrmann. His general movies that he makes and his vibe that he puts into the films is really what I'm going for, because he also did like Moulin Rouge and The Great Gatsby, and all of those just kind of have that big spectacle vibe that would really fit for Copacabana. For the music in this movie, I think using the music that was being played in the club at that time would really work, so using big band music would be the vibe, as that was just the popular music of the 1940s. This would include songs like Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy or In the Mood, but if you don't really have a mental image of what this sounds like, just Google it, I guess. But I do think we can definitely use that music in this movie. A man named Shep Fields and his orchestra played very commonly in the Copacabana in the 1940s, so using his music I think would be a very good starting place. Though this was also just the kind of time where everyone was just playing everybody else's songs, so more realistically it'd be like a Gershwin song or a Cole Porter song than a Shep Fields song specifically. Again, I'd like to be as historically accurate as possible, so avoiding any new music is the best bet. I think one of the worst parts of the Great Gatsby movie that Baz Luhrmann had done was the fact that they had used only really new music, and there was a disconnect between the time period the movie's taking place in and what it sounded like, so I really just want to stick with the 1940s music. I will, however, suggest if you really want that, like, newer sound, using electro swing, because it's just kind of like modernizing and hyping up old music. So if we wanted to do that, that'd be kind of fun and funky, but it does need to be in the basis of 1940s music if I'm going to put it in this movie. I'm not putting in like a 2020 song. As for the use of the song Copacabana, like the whole starting point for this video, I think we need to be very careful with where we place this, as I really don't want people remembering that this is what the movie is based after while they're watching it. I want them to really get super absorbed into the love story and all of the drama and the tragedy of it all, and by the end of it, truly just not remembering the song it's all based after, and while they're just so saddened by it all, and you just were now lost in Lola's hallucinations, you hear the groovy vibes of Barry Manilow and his Copacabana, and just, it's such an upbeat version of the tragedy you just watched. I think this would leave our audiences with, like, the peak emotional whiplash that I'm looking for, and I think it will haunt them a little bit, which I think is a great way to end this movie, because it is kind of a haunting song when you stop and think about it. It's a tragedy, but, like, it's so upbeat, and that's the only real place I think we should use it. If we wanted to put it maybe in, like, a background theme, maybe, like, just, like, little hints, but, again, I want people to forget that that's what they are watching. And so just putting it at the end credits, I think, would be perfect. To wrap it all up, I really think that Copacabana as a movie has the power to succeed and the potential to be a great film. And I really hope you have that vision with me now, as I have explained what I think it should look like. If you have any other ideas for aspects of this movie, please share them with me. Or if you'd like to hear me talk about any other songs that would be great movies and how I do them, let me know. Feel free to like and subscribe, but elsewise, I will see you next month.